finite mindset is everything is about this transaction, this listing. An infinite mindset is I may win or lose this game, I may win or lose this transaction, and there'll be another one. And the goal is not to win this one. The goal is to be better. And what happens is you win more often.
See, and where I struggle with that, honestly, is I want to crush it every time.
You're a highly competitive A-type personality, I get it. But if that's all you do, you're not going to be in the game for very long. But this is my point. In the infinite game, the infinite mindset is about having the strength, the will, and the resources. Will is I really still enjoy this industry. And the resources is I got the money to stay in the game. If you run out of will, you run out of resources, you find a different line of work, right? The goal is not to win every game. The goal is to stay in the game as long as possible. And you're more likely to stay in the game as long as possible if you're enjoying it and if you're making money. Think of those agents who are better than you, whether they're better marketers or better salesperson, or they have more recommendations. And again, you don't have to like them. You have to thank them and study them and learn what they're doing, as I said, because their strengths are revealing to you your weaknesses. And sometimes partner with them because you're actually stronger together. But hating them is stupid. All it does is make you focus on them rather than focus on yourself. All it does is make you focus and sit around with your friends and be like, but they don't do this. Well, you're not doing any of that either, you know? So it puts all your focus in all the wrong places. You know what it's like if you ski through trees? Every skier knows this. If you say, don't hit a tree, you hit a tree because all you're doing is looking at trees. Where when you're skiing through trees and you say, follow the path, you don't hit a tree because you're only looking at the path. So your mindset is if all you're doing is focusing on them, then you're hitting trees is what you're doing. You're focusing on all the things that make you weak rather than focusing on all the things that make you better.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Simon Sinek, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, be authentic.
A term that's been overused in business, this concept of authenticity, right? All that authenticity means is the things you say and the things you do, you actually believe. And there's a lot of room for cynicism in the financial advisor world, because every financial advisor says the right thing. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you find your nest egg to achieve your financial goals, blah, 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 blah. Every financial advisor I've ever met tells me the same thing. But then the way they make me feel, not always consistent. Where they may say the right things, but then they're not actually listening to the things that I want. I can feel that they're just trying to hammer a product. They're not actually trying to do what I talk about, but rather I can feel that they have an agenda, that they're pushing something on me. And so, we're highly attuned social animals. We can tell the difference. And if somebody's going to put their agenda, their commission, their interests first, then stop saying, I'm here to help you and achieve your financial goals because I care about you. Stop saying those words. I don't have a problem with somebody being selfishly minded when they approach their business. Just stop pretending that you're not. Because the ones that truly do care will be way more creative. If they say, I'm truly trying to help you, they'll be offering advice and forwarding articles that have nothing to do with the financial tools that you can buy from me. I might send you an article about, your teenagers and screen time, for example, because that's one of the things you're concerned about, and I'm here to help you live a better life. Like, I may be more curious about all of the aspects about helping you, of which some are the things that I can deliver on with the financial advice and some financial tools. So I think if you got into this business to help people, then help people. I think that's really, really important.
Rule number 3, build a successful culture.
I think one of the things that the pandemic revealed, quite frankly, was the weakness of so many corporate cultures. I mean, we're seeing the great resignation happening. And if you read articles or listen to some of the talking heads, the prevailing thought is, well, they're getting, checks from the government, so they're not encouraged to come back to work. Or they're pursuing their dreams, which we've seen as well in our own company. Somebody wants to go be a screenwriter, and even though we have a great relationship and they love their job, they want to pursue their dreams. But the other thing that I think is underlying that it's missing, that these commentaries are missing, is that the cultures may have been weaker than we like to think they are. That the sense of belonging that people have when they would come to work is actually a lot more tenuous than we'd like to believe. So the bond that's allowing them to go off and do other things is easily broken. I think strong cultures, when there's a strong corporate culture, we recognize that I can pursue my dreams and work because I love it here and I know my team is supportive of me becoming a screenwriter or something, and I can do both. Or even though I'm making money, potentially even more money, There's so much more I get from my work. The camaraderie, the love, the support. I get all of this training on how to be a better listener and a better communicator, which is helping me in my marriage and helping me with my kids. And I don't want to lose that. Plus, I have close friends at work, and I can speak up and say, "Hey, I'm being offered more money from the government. Is there anything you can help?" The point is it becomes a conversation rather than a resignation. So I think one of the things that we're missing is this might be a wake-up call for a lot of companies, that our cultures are just not as strong as we think they are. It's been spoken about for years that millennials, and now Gen Z are just not loyal to work. They bounce around from job year to year to year. Well, is that them or is that us? Maybe if we had stronger cultures, they wouldn't want to leave. Maybe if we offered them more than simply financial incentives for hitting certain numbers, that they'd want to stay. Maybe if they felt that they were growing as human beings, there would be things that were more appealing to them than simply a bigger paycheck somewhere else. So I actually think it's a big wake-up call, frankly, that we should go back and look at our cultures and say, are we as good as we think we are?
Rule number 4, establish resilience.
We always talk about being a stable company, and we talk about investing in stable companies, and are you stable? And you think about stability. Stability is an immobile object, and so companies that are built for stability, yes, they're able to weather storms, but they don't come out stronger or better. They just come out. They get through. Building a company for resilience means that you go into darkness, but you're actually able to adapt for new times, new technologies, new cultures, new politics, new tastes, and you come actually out of the hard times stronger than you went in. Victorinox is a great example. Victorinox, many of us know them by their signature product, which is the old Swiss Army knife. And this company basically made a name for themselves on this basically one line of product. And they had other product, but this was the core. And then something happened that they couldn't predict, nor could they prepare for, which is September 11th happened. And overnight, we were banned from taking their product in our bags, in our hand luggage or in our pockets. And so many of us used to carry a Swiss Army knife in our pockets or just throw one in our hand luggage. Like we all had one. Every birthday for every teenager, they got at least one, right? Every corporate gift, you had a couple of Swiss Army knives. And now we were banned from carrying them, which means you're less likely to buy one to give as a gift. And so their business plummeted overnight through no fault of their own, through no market conditions, nothing predictable. But the genius of Victorinox is that they were built for resilience. And what they did was in good times, instead of giving away all the money in big bonuses, in good times, they actually saved a ton of money. And their attitude was, good times don't last, but neither do bad times. And if we want to get through bad times, we need cash. And so instead of panicking and taking loans or whatever it is, they had their own stack of cash that they'd been hoarding. So they had a little financial resilience. But then they looked at other products and they asked their people to help build up. And they started investing heavily in watches. Now we have Victorinox watches, which are much more, and it's still Swiss made, everything that they could do, everything that they knew how to do, clothing, everything, they leveraged their brand heavily, and they built it back up. Also, they protected all of their people. They actually made deals with companies prior that if bad times ever happened, that other companies would borrow their employees, which I thought was genius. So they didn't lose their jobs, they just did their jobs somewhere else. And they completely reinvented their company. Now, to this day, their Swiss Army knife never really recovered. It came up back a bit, but it's now not the major product. It is a minor product that they sell because they actually came out stronger and reinvented. And to be able to do that, think about that. Coming in as one kind of company and coming out as another kind of company, very, very rare and very, very special, but very infinite-minded.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, practice emotional professionalism.
I think some people turn off the humanity when they go to work. You know, they may be, you know, loving parents and loving friends and loving, you know, children to their own parents, and yet for some reason there's a switch that they think that that's irresponsible to do at work. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily wearing your heart on your sleeve every day. There is something called emotional professionalism. You know, if you're having a bad day, you can say, listen, I'm a little off my game today, but you can't sit in a meeting with your arms folded and be grumpy and give one-word answers. That's emotionally unprofessional. You know, you can have hard feelings, but you can't go around screaming and yelling at people. You know, you can have, so I think there is emotional professionalism, but I think for some reason, especially as people make their way up the ranks, they think that expressing any kind of emotion is a sign of weakness. Even that word vulnerability, we talk, you know, it's such a common word now being talked about in the business world that you have to be vulnerable. To this day, it makes some people feel very uncomfortable. I don't want to be vulnerable. Well, all vulnerability means is saying things like, I don't know, or I need help, or I'm overwhelmed, or can you help me do this because I don't know how to do this, or I've been promoted to a position where maybe I need more training. And the reason we're afraid of saying that is for fear that it makes us look weak, which will then damage our careers. The reality is the total opposite. By saying I don't know means someone can help us. But instead we choose to lie, hide, and fake very often, which eventually gets revealed. Enough stress piled on that lying, hiding, and faking collapses either professionally or personally. We either feel the stress or the projects that we're working on start to go haywire. And very often when we get to those points, everybody knows anyway. The amazing thing that I've learned is when you say, can somebody help me? We're surrounded by people who would love to help us. They just didn't think we needed it because we acted as if we didn't. So I think a large part of it is quite frankly fear. Fear that if I express these things, that people will think I'm not qualified for my job, where the opposite is true. And remember, when you are in a position of leadership, you don't actually have to be better at doing the job that the people you lead. You have to be responsible for taking care of them to make sure they're good at their job. But for some reason, we think that I have to be better than you at your own job because I'm the leader. Completely false. I just have to make sure that you're equipped, you have the tools, the training, and the psychological safety to be the best you can be, even if it's better than me.
Rule number 6, develop critical feedback.
One of the things that we do is creating a culture in which people understand that the reason we're giving feedback is not to quote unquote criticize them, but to help them grow as human beings. And that has to be established. Like this is what the advice I offer is it's not just a checklist that you do and everything goes fine. You know, you create a culture in which difficult conversations and critical feedback are welcomed or at least understood. But it's also how we give it. Usually we give it by pulling out a piece of paper and pointing out the thing that's wrong. And saying you got to fix something, right? We usually point to the evidence first. As opposed to starting by the human being, which is, you know, there's stuff I want to share with you. I don't know what it means, but I wanted to raise it with you in case there is an issue. Because I care about you and I want to see that you grow here, but there's some evidence that things are going a little sideways, and I want to address them with them to see what opportunities there are, or if there's anything wrong, because I don't know the reasons behind it. But here's, for example, the way you talked to your teammates the other day was a little harsh. And ordinarily, I'd be one to say, "Oh, you know, you're having a bad day. It's no problem. You know, everybody gets a bad day." But you've been really beating up on people. I don't even know if you're aware of that, right? And sometimes they'll say, "I'm having a hard time," and it opens up, or they'll say, "I wasn't even aware. I didn't even know," or it reveals something, as opposed to saying, "Stop yelling at people. Nobody wants to work for you if all you do is yell at people." You know, it's hard for people to receive. And so good feedback is not just about conveying the point we're trying to make. It's about creating a condition in which the person is more likely to listen and hear it. So we're all proud of ourselves once we've told them, did you give her the feedback? Yeah, I told her, right? Did they hear the feedback? Different question.
Rule number 7, be a good listener.
I think one of the essential skills of being a good coach is listening. And this is a skill that is not taught in school. We don't learn it on home, unfortunately, and we don't learn it at work. Listening is not hearing the words that are spoken.
That's like my favorite quote that you say. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Listening is, I thought I was being original. The Listening is not about hearing the words that are spoken. It's not being able to parrot back what somebody said to you. Listening is listening for meaning, right? You are a good listener. The test for being a good listener is if the other person feels heard, right?
Say that again.
Right?
Write that down.
So I mean, we've all had, we just take it out of the context of business, right? We've all had an argument or wanted to share our feelings with a friend or a loved one, right? Spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend. You're sitting on the couch and you say, something's bugging you, and you say, can I just tell you something that's bugging me? And they respond by trying to fix it. Or they respond by pointing out the facts that may or may not align with how you feel, right? Well, that's impossible because this is what happened. And what they're missing is you're not looking for them to compare the facts of what's being said. You just want to feel heard. You just want somebody to go, oh my God, that's really hard. Yeah, I hear it. I hear that. Thank you for sharing that with me. That must be difficult. Thank you, that's all I needed, right? I'll give you a very funny example of bad listening. So I used to date a girl who's an air traffic controller. Air traffic controllers are a breed unto themselves, and it's only about the facts. And I woke up one morning, I had something in my eye, and I couldn't open my eye, it was hurting. And I'm like flushing it out with water, and nothing's working. And I couldn't even open my eye, and I have her come, I'm like, come here. I'm like, look in my eye, do you see anything? Do you see anything? And she looks in, she goes like this, and she goes, there's nothing there, and then walks away. And I eventually, whatever it was, I eventually was okay. And I went up to her, I was like, WTF, right? I'm like, I had something in my eye, you just walked away. And she's like, there was nothing there, so what do you want me to do? I was like, a little sympathy? She's like, well, that's not gonna get anything out of your eye. Listening is standing by my side while I'm flushing it out with water and go, oh my God, that must hurt so much. Yeah, it does, thank you, right? That's listening. And if somebody can learn to listen, and now this is where it gets actionable. This is not me just waxing philosophical and telling funny stories about listening. My friend Will Guidera, how many of you are restaurant people? Have you ever heard of 11 Madison Park? So at some point in New York City, 11 Madison Park was the best restaurant in the world, right? Ranked number one. And Will believes in this, he was the former owner, he believes in this concept of unreasonable hospitality, which is going to what good service is and then going way, way, way beyond. And one of the core tenets of unreasonable hospitality is learning to listen. And I'll give you an example that directly impacts your business. Most agents don't listen. And I'll give you an example. What do you do for your clients after they close on a home, right? It's very common. We've all bought a home too, right? Which is you walk into this new home that you just bought as a buyer, and there's a bottle of champagne in the fridge. There's a basket of flowers on the dining room table. The same basket of flowers that you gave to every other client, the same bottle of champagne that you gave to every client. Generic. I'm a number. It's just rote. But if you were listening, while they were looking at all those homes, and they saw this one little room that was too small to make a bedroom, it was just sort of a stupid little nook that nobody really understood why that room existed in the house, and your client walked in and goes, oh, I could make this my yoga room, and that's the house they bought. Instead of putting a bottle of champagne in the house, this is what Will talks about, instead of putting a bottle of champagne in the fridge, why not put a yoga mat in that room with a little note that says, it's perfect, right? That's called listening. And every single time you go out with clients, they are telling you things. They're telling you stories. They're waxing philosophical. They're telling you what they don't like and what they do like. But the problem is you're listening to whether they like big windows. You're listening to whether they like the view. You're listening to whether they have 2 cars and they need 3 cars or whatever it is. But you're not listening to the reasons why.
The why.
You're not listening for the meaning. And those are the little notes you want to make that make someone feel seen and make someone feel heard.
Rule number 8, learn to trust.
I had the opportunity to work with the Navy SEALs. And within the Navy SEALs, there's actually a more elite group within the SEALs. That's much harder to get into. You have to be a SEAL for like 5 years before you even can get into this even more elite group. And I asked the director of training for this group, how do you choose who gets into this more elite group within your own culture? And he drew an XY axis. He drew a graph for me. And on the vertical axis, he wrote performance. And on the horizontal axis, he wrote trust. the way they define performance is how good are you at your job, right? Your skill set. The way they define trust is what kind of person are you? And the way they put it is, I may trust you with my money, I may trust you with my life, but do I trust you with my money and my wife, right? So there's clearly nobody wants the low performer of low trust, clearly. Clearly, everybody wants the high performer of high trust on their team, clearly. What they learned is that a high performer of low trust is actually a toxic team member. And they would rather have a medium performer of high trust, sometimes a low performer of high trust, it's a relative scale, over the high performer of low trust. And this is one of the highest performing organizations on the planet. And they put huge credence in the trustworthiness and the character of the team member over their simple performance metrics. In business, we're the opposite. We have 1 million metrics to measure someone's performance, and we have negligible to no metrics to measure someone's trust. And so you may have a selfish-driven, toxic team member who, if they're high-performing, what do? We promote them. And sometimes you get to the point where leadership knows that this person is toxic, and you say, you probably should do something about this. You maybe want to remove them from the team. And they say the same thing. They're like, yeah, I know, but their performance is so good. You are literally just waiting for something to collapse, meaning either other people will leave, or the culture will start to crack, or there's a scandal, or that person will leave because they get a better job offer. They're not loyal, so they may be your highest performer, but they're not loyal. What the SEALs learn is sometimes these medium performers of high trust are your best natural leaders. The irony is, if you go to any team, it's actually really easy to find these toxic team members. That's the irony, even though we don't formally measure it. Go to any team and ask them who the asshole is, and they'll all point to the same person. Okay? And that's an opportunity to coach them. I don't believe in firing them. I believe in coaching them. We let people go when they're proved to be uncoachable. And by the way, if you go to that same team, you say, who do you trust more than anybody else? Who's got your back no matter what? Who's always there to help you? They'll probably also point to the same person who might be your best natural leader, and they may not be your best individual performer.
Rule number 9, don't be afraid to speak up.
We don't teach difficult conversations. We don't teach conflict resolution. We don't teach de-escalation. And we don't teach how to give and receive feedback. We don't teach how to treat ideas. We don't even teach people how to have a meeting. Like, we don't teach any of these things. And so we're just leaving it up to chance to hope that somebody knows what they're doing, which we would never let somebody on the front line do. We give them tons of training on how to do their jobs. So part of it is the skill set that we can train. The other thing is a lot of leaders, I think, are afraid of doing things for fear of saying the wrong thing. And again, this really lends itself to the training we need to give our leaders. And especially, I think this was really exaggerated after the murder of George Floyd, where so many leaders did nothing. They're not bad people. They were just so afraid of saying the wrong thing or inflaming a situation or triggering someone that they chose to just do nothing. And so one of the things we need to do is teach people how to lean into tension, and to learn how to de-escalate one's own anger or one's own trigger. And again, you brought it up before, which is, and replace it with curiosity. Tell me more. What else? I'm struggling to understand. Let me tell you the story that's going through my head, I think is a really big one that I've learned, which is because I'm reacting based on my own narrative, right? And so they're reacting to my words or my reaction. And so one of the things that's really helped me is to share what's going on in my head so that people have the context of where my reaction's coming from. Let me tell you what my history is and what my background is. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just telling you my story. And I'll say, I had this happen in the past where X, Y, and Z. And so I'm nervous at your suggestion because in the past, this has happened. Can you help me resolve this, or do you understand where I'm coming from? And I think the more we can share what's going on in the process, rather than simply, responding with our answers or our reactions, helps the other person see the way we're trying to see it, and it also encourages us to see the way they're trying to see it. So I think the more we share, it's that vulnerability word again, right? Let me tell you my history. Let me tell you my baggage. Let me tell you my background. Let me tell you my experiences. Let me tell you where my opinion is coming from. The worst thing, the one that drives me up the wall, the one that triggers me is, this is how we've always done it. Well, why do we do it that way? Because this is how we've always done it. And my rule is, if you cannot tell me why we're doing it this way, that means it's on the chopping block. That doesn't mean it has to change, but I want real explanations of why we do something this way. If somebody can't tell me, then it's open to being changed.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is understand diversity.
I try and read news from both sides of the political aisle, not to find the one I agree with, but I want to understand how it's being reported. I want to know the different narratives that are being told so that I can understand those narratives, so I can speak to those narratives, I can learn those narratives, and find hypocrisy in both sides, by the way. I think that the one mistake that we all fall into is to decide that the ones that I agree with are right and the ones that I disagree with are wrong. And this binary notion of right versus wrong is what's gotten us into this mess in the first place. Life is not so black and white in no respect. It's nuanced and gray and complicated and messy. And to understand that we are hypocrites in our own opinions, and so is the other side. And simply pointing out the hypocrisy of the other side is of no help whatsoever. What's more important is to point out our own hypocrisy. And to try and understand that. Like I said, it's a worthy rivalry thing, right? It's not trying to dominate or be right, but it's rather try to improve and to grow. And so one of the things that I default to are values. I'm very proud of the fact that some of my friendships are with people who have very, very, very different political points of view, who we voted very, very differently in political elections, and we can go to blows talking about some of the things that the government is deciding whether we agree or disagree with it. But at the end of the day, their values are like mine. And we believe in taking care of each other, and we believe in looking out for each other. And at the end of the day, more than their politics, they are my friend. And I learned this lesson the hard way, where I was going for a walk with a friend who has very different political views than me. And she said something, and I definitely thought it, and I fear I may have said it. How can you be so stupid? And I realized I just called my friend stupid. And she completely got angry at me, not because I disagreed with her, it's because I judged her and insulted her. And you know what? She was 100% right. And what I had to learn in that moment was to listen, was to replace my judgment with curiosity, and to understand where her point of view comes from. And the more curious I became, to understand that there were actually things that we did agree upon. And though we may not have agreed upon everything, we actually could find common ground. And that common ground always boiled down to our values. And the more that I got good at listening to her, we became much more open to listening to me. And so as opposed to me hammering my opinion at her, we started to have conversations. And so I think when you go to a values level, politics becomes secondary. But when we let go of our values, then all we have is the politics, which is upsetting. There are 5 practices in order to lead with an infinite mindset. You have to have a just cause. You have to have trusting teams. You have to have a worthy rival. You have to have a capacity for existential flexibility. And you have to have the courage to lead. So just cause. We have to give our people something to advance. A cause so just that they would be willing to sacrifice their interests in order to do so. In other words, turn down a better paying job, or frequent business trips, or working late hours. And though I may not like those things, I do them because it feels worth it. Because I believe in what I'm a part of here. Because I feel that I'm helping advance. Because there's no achieving in the infinite game. The goal is not final achievement. The goal is advancing, to progress in the infinite game. And to have that vision of an idealized state of the world that all men are created equal, right? It's an ideal that a nation is striving towards, that will never actually get there, but will die trying. That's the point. And we can offer people the same thing inside an organization. In fact, we have to give them something to advance. Now, how is this different from the why? A why comes from the past. It is an origin story. Every single one of us has our own unique why. It is our birthright. It comes from the sum total of how we were raised as kids. It is objective. You have one, and you have one for the rest of your life. The only one, right? And the rest of our lives are about making the decisions that help us keep in balance with our why. A just cause doesn't come from the past. A just cause is about the future. It's about where we're going, right? You can have multiple just causes. You can have one professionally, you can have one personally, you can have one for your family, you can have one for your church. And we're involved in all of these. There's massive pressure put on people, especially young people, to what's your vision? Well, we're not all Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. We're not all visionaries. We don't have to have a vision, but we do have to find a vision. That we can find someone else's vision, and we are so compelled by it that we want to make it our own. That's what it means to go work for a company with a visionary leader, that we believe in that vision so clearly that we take their vision and we make it our own. And we will happily contribute our work, our effort, in order to advance what is now my vision. Right? Martin Luther King had a vision. He stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and told us his vision, but his vision became our vision. So I may not have come up with that vision, but I found it, and I'd like to devote time and energy to help advance it, even beyond him.
How do we replace our judgment with curiosity? So there's a simple technique. There are simple techniques to do this. One is write yourself a little reminder. Put a little sticky on your computer that says be curious or ask questions. You'll be amazed how well that works. But especially in times when we're judging, especially when we're in groups of leaders, we're in meetings, we can snowball into judgment really quickly. Let's say someone's performance is in decline. Immediately, they're lazy, they're stupid, they don't understand, they're a problem child. All it takes is one person to break that judgment and say, well, maybe they're going through something. And there is a technique where when you start to form a narrative about someone or about something, that you force yourself to come up with 21 possible alternatives of what could be going on in their life. So, are they lazy? Absolutely. That's absolutely a possibility. Are they a problem child? Are they toxic? Absolutely. Are they going through, are their kids struggling at school? Maybe. Do they have problems in their family? Maybe someone's sick? Maybe. Do they have medical issues that they're hiding from us, that they're too embarrassed about? Maybe. My point is can you go through the exercise of writing 20 or 21 alternative stories of what could be happening, and all of a sudden we find ourselves talking about and treating that person differently? And it doesn't just come about people, it's also about decisions we're making at work. And again, in a meeting, all it takes is one person to raise a question of what if. As leaders, the more we start asking each other and ourselves, what if, or what are the opportunities, or what are the possibilities, we'll find ourselves doing that with our people. That when they come to us, instead of us correcting them and telling them that they're wrong, raising questions. But believe it or not, simply having a little reminder to be curious is really important.
When I wrote Leaders Eat Last, that book, it was a behemoth.
Yeah.
And I had, nights and weekends were a fantasy, yeah. And it became an obsession. It was like a beautiful mind. I used to keep a magic marker, not a magic marker, a dry erase marker in my bathroom, so that if I was in the shower and had an idea, as soon as I got out of the shower, I'd write it on the tiles. And I'd stand there brushing my teeth in the morning or the evening, and I'd read one of the notes that I wrote on the tile, and I'd have another idea. And if you walked into my bathroom, the tiles were filled with ideas.
I love it.
It was really insanity. It was fun though. But I lost 2 relationships over the course of that book. Yeah, because I was not myself. I was stressed out, and I was short, and and as soon as the book was done, I'm still friends with one of my exes, who was the one I was dating, writing that book, and she only knew me in that period, and she knows me now, and she's like, this is better.
Wow,
I know.
You're a nicer human being.
It's not just nicer. I'm less stressed. But would I have changed it? No.
Yeah.
Those sacrifices would have been nice for those relationships to have lasted. But the book, the message is bigger than me.
When you're trying to build trusting teams, you recognize that you cannot enforce certainty on people. You can offer goals. People like goals. But what's important is how we get there, not just that we got there. Right. Think of it like trying to lose weight, right? There's nothing wrong with setting arbitrary goals with arbitrary dates, which is, by the way, how we build our businesses. Right. We want to hit X amount of dollars in revenue by probably the end of the year, because that's when we pay taxes. It's a completely arbitrary number. Somebody might say, we could do better than that. And you're like, you're right. And then we change the number, right? Complete works of fiction. So we're striving to hit a work of fiction, right? Yeah. And it's the same when we want to lose weight. I want to lose X amount of pounds by X date. Arbitrary, right?
And we're doing all the things to do that. We're exercising, eating well, all the things. We love standing on the scale. We love a metric. There's nothing wrong with that. Human beings need that. We can't run in a marathon without mile markers. It's actually unnerving. We need to know how fast and how far. So the metrics are good. And let's say you hit your goal, right? You hit your performance goal just as you had articulated. Amazing. You feel incredible. You feel like you've succeeded. Here's the problem. You have to keep exercising for the rest of your life. Right? In other words, you don't stop doing the things that you were doing. So the game hasn't ended. It was simply a waypoint. But what I think is more interesting is what happens if you miss your goal? What happens if you don't lose the amount of weight that you wanted on that date? And the answer is nothing. Nothing happens because you're probably way healthier than you are now than you were. You're probably easily you can see the trend data. You can see you're well on your way to hitting your goal. You just picked the wrong date. You're easily going to hit it in another month if you just stick to your regime. Business is the same, which is sometimes we miss our goals, but the question is what's the trend data? Is the team working well together? Is morale high? Is some of it out of our control? Market conditions and things like that, things we didn't know about. And so if we happen to miss the number, the problem is how are we rewarding our people? And so many of us only reward our people based on if they hit the number. But what if they're begging, borrowing, and stealing? What if they simply rush at the end of the quarter to drop their prices or have some sort of promotion or have some trickery? They'll hit the number. And then we bonus them, which tells everybody else, I don't care how you hit your numbers as long as you hit them. Well, guess what kind of behavior that's going to reinforce inside our organization? Whereas if you look at the data, the trend data, and you reward somebody who's well on the path, what we're telling you is as long as you're doing a good job, you'll do well in this organization. Leaders understand that they are not responsible for the results. They are responsible for the people who are responsible for the results. And that skill set is very, very different than just trying to get people to do the thing that you know how to do better than them because you've been doing it your whole life. How can we ensure that we're changing with times, technology, culture, politics, and tastes, rather than just trying to beat our competitor? And you see it across industries. Publishing, for example. The internet showed up and they saw it and they thought it was nice. And they, as it took on, they sort of, I guess they were interested in it. They sort of played defense. And then Amazon showed up and Amazon went to all of them and said, hey, you want to invest in us? And they all said no. Well, now they're all playing catch up. They're all playing defense. Netflix went to Blockbuster and said, want to buy us? And Blockbuster said no. The rest of the TV and movie industry were too busy comparing who had higher ratings. And they completely missed the fact that Netflix has now completely reinvented television. I find that fascinating. General Motors was destroying its own electric vehicles to protect its old business, and now they're all rushing to catch up with Tesla. I think this is hilarious. And it's the little companies, the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Teslas, that get ignored, that aren't seen as a threat, that end up defining and redefining entire marketplaces. Now, this is not unique to small companies. Big companies can absolutely redefine. The problem is big companies are more obsessed with their finite goals. Big companies are more obsessed with beating their competitors. And little companies are obsessed with their vision. Little companies are obsessed with this outsized vision that outstrips the resources they have, right? Somebody says, we're going to do this. And everybody looks around and goes, well, we don't have the money for that. We don't have the talent for that. I guess we'll have to be creative. And I think this is one of the opportunities for big companies. As they get big, their visions get smaller. They become goals that they can just do a back plan for. There's nothing inherent that a big company shouldn't be innovative. But to your point before, they become risk averse. They become stable. And at the end of the day, it takes huge vision. What I imagine is a huge corporation, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, that someone will say, we imagine a world that's so crazy and so idealistic that in this large corporation, they all look around and go, we don't have the money for that. We don't have the talent for that. I guess we'll have to be creative, which scares the heck out of the investor community. But remember, all of those companies were founded by, whether it's your Steve Jobs or all of these companies, Salesforce, they all started by young people who had no experience and only had vision. And I think there's no reason why big companies cannot be innovative. But I think
It's about pushing their own boundaries and allowing for entrepreneurship. And inherent in entrepreneurship is failure. You can't experiment without failing. I remember talking to a CFO of a big company once, and he told me that he has two priorities for the company, innovation and efficiency. I said, good luck with that. There's nothing efficient about innovation because you have to keep trying something over and over again. There's nothing efficient about that. And for some reason, I don't know what it is, companies are obsessed with growth. And everybody, they brag, we're a hyper-growth company. Show me one article, not 10, not 15, show me one article that shows any data that hyper-growth is good for business and good for the company. There is no data to show that companies who are obsessed with growth actually build stronger companies. Because they don't. And so it is a fool's errand that is promoted usually by an incentive structure that rewards short-term benefits. I think what companies can do is start to look at their incentive structures and start rewarding things like teamwork, ethics, and long-term gain. And guess what? You'll get the behavior you reward.
So there's another guy who does what I do. He's extremely well respected. He does extremely good work. I hate him. He's always been very nice to me when I've seen him professionally. I have an irrational hatred of him. And whenever his name comes up, it drives me nuts. Like people bring it, we hired him, and I was like, good. And because I hate him, I'm really competitive with him. And so I will go online and look at my book rankings, and I'll immediately check his. And mind you, I don't look at anybody else's, just his. And if I'm ahead, I've got this smug feeling. And if he's ahead, I get really pissed off, So anyway, we had the opportunity to speak at the same event. I don't mean me in the morning, him in the afternoon. We were interviewed together on the stage. And the interviewer thought it would be fun if we introduced each other. And so I went first. And then I looked at him and I said, you make me really insecure. All of your strengths are all of my weaknesses, and when your name comes up, it makes me really uncomfortable. And he looked at me and he said, funny, I feel the same about you. The reason I had such an irrational hatred of him had nothing to do with him, it had to do with me. He's my worthy rival. His strengths revealed to me my own weaknesses. And instead of confronting and taking a hard look at myself and evaluating those weaknesses and working on those weaknesses, it was much easier to take all of that negative energy and direct it towards him. In other words, to be competitive, to want to beat him, right? It was a very cathartic experience. We've since become very close friends, have worked together. I no longer check his book rankings. And because we share the same cause, we can actually work together. And so what I recognized was so often in business, we have these competitors, sometimes on our own teams, that we want to beat them. We've all had the experience where one of our colleagues got a promotion and we got upset, we got angry. We got angry at somebody else's success. Think about that for a second. Why couldn't we share in the joy, right? What is it about them that's being revealed in us? That's the problem, right? And so having worthy rivals, instead of competitors are other players we set out to beat. But the problem with that is there's no finish line. And so if we're obsessed with beating the other company, then at some point, sure, you're ahead in whatever metric you chose, until when, right? At what expense, at what cost? That's not sustainable. But rather, the other players inside our industry, outside our industry, on our own teams, we can choose our own worthy rivals. Their strengths reveal to us our weaknesses, and by having our weaknesses revealed to us, it means we have the opportunity to grow and improve. And the infinite game, at its core, is basically a game of constant improvement. And so our worthy rivals reveal to us our weaknesses and our opportunities to improve. We make time for the things that matter to us.
Yeah.
And of course I have regrets, but regrets is not, I wouldn't use the word regret. Of course there are things that I missed. But I made a choice, and I'm very happy with that choice, and I stand by that choice, because not only have I had the opportunity, the amazing experience to spread this message and see it actually grow and be bigger than me, but I've had the opportunity to live an absolutely surreal life because of it. My life profoundly changed course. Yeah. And I can't, it's not fair to compare those things. Yeah. They're not equals. Yeah. Everybody with straight hair wants curly hair, and everybody with curly wants straight hair.
That wants to be blonde.
Yeah, I mean, I know people who have the stability in the home life and the families, and look at my life and be like, oh my God, I wish I had that. Mm-hmm. And you look at my life and I'm bouncing all around, and I mean, the answer is I'm really grateful
for the life that I live.
Yeah.
So no, regret is not the word that I would use.
But there was a price and a cost.
But there's a price and a cost that I took willingly.
First and foremost, we have to understand that there's no such thing as certainty of outcome. And this is why, this is a huge difference between finite mindsets and infinite mindsets, right? A finite-minded leader is afraid of surprises and does not like uncertainty, which is why they like to work in very short time frames, because you can actually affect quite a lot of certainty if you only think quarter to quarter, maybe year to year. But if you start thinking in 5 and 10 year increments, we all know we have zero control over those outcomes. So finite-minded players like to play with very short time frames because it makes them feel better, even though the game is infinite. So it's actually, again, sort of a stupid idea. Infinite-minded players embrace uncertainty and find opportunity in surprise. And so where something goes wrong or different, and just as an aside, I got such a kick out of when COVID struck, everybody was talking about during these uncertain times. Newsflash, all times are uncertain. There's never been a time in history ever that was certain. All that happened was something that we didn't expect took place that reminded us that time is uncertain. And for the finite-minded players, the immediate reaction was panic, right? What am I going to do? How am I going to survive? And try and double down on the old way of doing things, hoping that if I just did it more, or at least attempt to do it online, that it would survive, right? The more infinite-minded players, and this has nothing to do with stress, we can still have high stress with what was going on, but the more infinite-minded players saw the sudden change in their business and thought, ooh, okay, this is an opportunity. What can I do with this? And instead of doubling down on the way they used to do things, but doing it online, they said, okay, the times have changed, the way I operate my business have changed, all the things that I used to be able to do, like having lunch with people, can't do anymore. So given what I know now, if I was starting from scratch, I have something really valuable and important, how would I build my business today to still provide the value to the people who are looking for the thing that I offer? And that was their mentality. Their mentality was very entrepreneurial. Their mentality was very creative. And though it may have caused stress, there was an appreciation for the opportunity.
We are designed to take care of each other. As social animals, it is in our biology that we will take care of each other. This is why it feels so good when somebody does something really nice for us with no expectation of anything in return. We've all had the experience where somebody does something nice and you're like, oh my God, thank you. And then they put their hand out, you're like, oh, it kind of like ruins the whole experience,
Completely,
right?
absolutely.
It ruins it. But when they just do it and they're like, no. And you're like, please. And they're like, no, it's my pleasure.
Yes.
Not only does our esteem for them go up, but it feels good. Yeah. Likewise, it feels good when we do something for someone else with no expectation of anything in return. When we give our time and our energy. Money actually doesn't work, believe it or not. Like if I told you I gave $500 to charity this morning, you'd be like, okay.
That's great, Simon.
But if I told you that last weekend I gave up my Saturday and went to painted schools in the inner city, you'd be like, nice, that's really awesome. Yeah. Right? Now, the value of my labor was worth a lot less than $500. And that's the point, right? That's the point, which is we are designed to take care of each other. And there's a chemical called oxytocin, which is the chemical responsible for our feelings of love and friendship and trust. When you look at somebody you adore and you go like this, that's oxytocin. When somebody touches you and says, oh my God, it's so good to see you. Touch creates oxytocin. It's so good to see you.
Yes.
It actually makes us feel closer to each other.
Yes.
When oxytocin is released in our bodies, not only does it make us feel good, not only does it boost our immune systems, but the more oxytocin we have in our bodies, it actually makes us more generous because the human body is trying to get us to look after each other. And it gets even better than that. The person who does the act of generosity, giving of time or energy without expectation of anything in return, they get a shot of oxytocin. The person on the receiving end gets a shot of oxytocin. And even witnessing an act of generosity or kindness releases oxytocin. It feels good to see somebody do something nice. And the more oxytocin we have in our bodies, as I said, means we're more likely to do something nice for somebody. This is the biology of pay it forwards. It's the human body's desperate attempt to get us to look after each other. And so when we create environments where we allow that to flow, it does naturally. It just takes care of itself. It's just biology. When we create environments where we restrict that, it actually does the opposite. It releases a chemical called cortisol, which is the feeling of stress and anxiety. Cortisol actually inhibits oxytocin, which means if we work in a poorly led organization, not only do we have high stress, but it actually inhibits empathy. In other words, I'm less likely to even want to
care about somebody because of the poor leadership and the poor environment that's been provided for me to work in, right? And the more cortisol we have in our bodies, stress goes up, anxiety goes up, it affects our immune systems. Happy people live longer. Happy people have lower rates of cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, which means when you're in a position of leadership, you're actually medically responsible for the lives of these people. Get the environment right, they will live longer, they will suffer lower cases of disease, and they will probably have happier families because of it. Whereas if you're a bad leader, over the course of time, you're actually killing the people working with you. Our jobs are actually killing us.
Working at a hard job, working for a bad boss, can sometimes be one of the greatest educations ever. So the question is, can you change your mindset? Instead of waking up in the morning going, oh, I can't do this again, but rather view it as university. You know, you're getting a master's degree in leadership and you might be learning everything how not to do things. And to wake up in the morning and be like, what am I going to learn today? Early on in my career, I had a really bad boss who believed that she could get the most out of us by berating us. And she told me once that I had one of my reviews and she said, you have no talent. And I was like, nothing? And she was like, nothing. This was her way of, I guess, motivating me. But I had such a good attitude about it for a couple of reasons. One, because I knew what I was up against every day. And instead of taking it personally, I viewed it as my education of how not to lead. And I literally would file this stuff all away and use it someday. I get to use it now. And also, misery loves company. You know, I had a fantastic relationship with my team. We looked after each other because we all had this oppressive boss. We would compare the advice that we got in our little career building sessions, and we took care of each other. And so we had a responsibility to each other, and that's where we cut our teeth on being leaders. And it actually made the job wonderful. Yes, there were days that were oppressive. Yes, there were days that I hated. Yes, there were days that I wanted to pull my hair out and just quit. But it's because of the team that I had, and we looked after each other, and the mindset of learning every day that I made the most of it. So I think mindset is a huge part of actually getting some joy out of a difficult job.
When the pandemic struck, I mean, my book came out a few months before the pandemic, and so for someone like me who loves to observe and whether this stuff is true or not, you know, you sort of go, you know, you sort of wonder, is everything going to hold up or not? And as an existential flex is something that I predicted would happen either zero, once, or at the absolute most twice in a career. But when COVID happened, we all went through it at the same time. Existential flexibility is that you're able to make a profound 180-degree strategic shift in order to continue to advance your cause. In other words, stay relevant. This is not about the daily flexibility of business. We're talking profound strategic shift here. And sometimes brought on by pandemic, sometimes brought on by changing technology or politics or culture or tastes, but you're able to adjust. So for example, it's Apple, Steve Jobs, when they're developing technology in one direction, they discover this thing called the graphic user interface that they did not invent, and they decide to walk away from millions of dollars spent and countless man hours in order to focus on a different strategic position, because Jobs believed that was a better way to advance his cause of empowering individuals to use personal computers. That's existential flex.
Find a friend you love, and one of those people who, if you called them at 3:00 in the morning, you know they'd take your call and you would take theirs. Don't do this with a spouse. Don't do this with a sibling. Don't do this with a boyfriend or girlfriend. Those relationships are too close. But find a best friend and ask them this simple question: why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy, because it's very hard for the human brain to put our feelings into words, because the part of the brain that controls our feelings doesn't control language. This is why we use metaphors and analogies, and why we struggle to tell people how we actually feel. It's because it's a different part of the brain. And so they're going to look at you and be like, I don't know. Why are you asking me this? And you say, come on, I know you've been there for me my whole life. And then you actually stop asking the question why, ironically. You actually ask the question what. You say, come on, what specifically is it about me that I know you'd be there for me no matter what? And they're going to hem and haw because it's hard to put into words. Don't help them. Don't let anybody else help them. And they're going to start describing you. I don't know. You're funny. You're smart. You're honest, you've always been there for me. You go, good. You play devil's advocate. Good. That's the definition of a friend. What specifically is about me that I'd know you'd be there for me no matter what? And again, they'll hem and haw, and some will get through this quickly, and some will get through it slowly, and it'll be a struggle, and you have to continue to play devil's advocate. Good, that's the definition of a close friend. What specifically is about me? And eventually, they'll give up. Eventually, they'll stop describing you, and they'll start describing themselves. Like my friend said to me, Simon, I don't know. All I know is that I can sit in a room with you. I don't even have to talk to you, and I feel inspired, and I got goosebumps. In fact, I'm getting them right now. They will put into words the value you have in their life, and you will have the emotional reaction. You'll either well up with tears or you will get goosebumps. This puts you in the ballpark. This is where your why lives. And if you do this with multiple friends, they will say the same kind of thing. In fact, sometimes they'll say the same exact thing, because your why is the thing you give to the world, and amongst your closest and best friends, it is the space you fill in their lives. So that's a fun little way you can find your why.
What I think is really interesting is think of a date like a job interview, right? And think of a job interview like a date, right? So if you went on a first date with someone and they sat down, they said, I'm extremely rich. I've made lots of money. I do lots of cool things. I've met a lot of famous people. I go on TV all the time, which is good because I'm really good looking. Would you want to go on a second date with them, right? Not very appealing. It's also not very appealing when we sit down for a job interview and just tell people how great we are and all the things that we've done. It's the same kind of thing. Now imagine if you knew your why and you're making conversation with someone and they say, so, where are you from? Tell me a little bit about you. And you say, I love what I do. I love my life. I love my job. You can say, I wake up every day to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. And for me, the challenge is finding all the different ways that I could do it. And I've been really, really grateful for the path that it's taken me. And I've made some money, and I've get to go on TV, which is fun because I'm really good looking. And you can see how all the same jokes and all the same things now have a context. And that's what why does. It provides context. It also helps you connect with somebody, that when somebody's telling you about themselves and you ask some questions and you get to know them a little bit and you realize that maybe their values are completely different than yours. So why gives you clarity and confidence in who you are and what you need around you. But it also helps you present yourself in a way that's way more authentic. Now, there's a rub to the why that I don't talk about that often, because you really have to get good at giving your why before you can deal with this. But the difficult part about knowing your why is the thing that you give to the world, the value you give and offer to other people, is also the thing you need the most. So it's one of the ways to understand the people in our lives, partners and mates, is can they actually give us the thing that we give to other people?
The thinking of Milton Friedman, the 1970s economist, has really dominated sort of business theory today. He theorized that the responsibility of business, this is his definition, the responsibility of business is to maximize profit within the bounds of the law, right? What about ethics? Like a pharmaceutical company that raises the price on essential drug 200%, 300%, 500%, 800%, it's not illegal. It is unethical, right? It makes us uncomfortable, and yet the law is not broken. That's not a good enough standard to run a business. And it was his thinking that gave rise to the theory of shareholder supremacy, which was a theory proposed in the late 1970s, where we prioritize the wants, needs, and desires of a shareholder over the needs of the customer or the employee, which is like a coach who's trying to build a great team by doing what the fans want versus what the players need, right? That's basically shareholder supremacy. And as I said, it was just a theory proposed in the late 1970s that was popularized during the boom years of the 80s and 90s. Mass layoffs, where we use the livelihoods of human beings to meet arbitrary projections on an annualized basis at the end of the year, did not exist as a standard business practice prior to the 1980s. Did not exist. It was popularized during the 80s and 90s. The dismantling of Glass-Steagall, which was an act passed after the Great Depression to prevent another Great Depression from happening, and by the way, was extremely effective. Between the dismantling of the Glass-Steagall in the 80s and 90s and the Great Depression, there were a total of 0 stock market crashes. Since the dismantling, all in the name of corporate profit, we've had 3. We had the dot-com boom, Black Monday in 2008. In other words, when we play simply with a finite mindset, we actually do long-term damage to our own system that's supposed to benefit all of us. And I find that upsetting. We've seen the rise of Milton's, of Friedman's thinking, rather. And like I said, his theories dominate business today. And we feel it. Not only have we had those stock market crashes, but anybody who goes to work today, there's a general feeling of unease, especially if you work for a company that embraces annual or even quarterly layoffs to meet arbitrary projections. Keep in mind, a lot of the companies that employ mass layoffs are profitable, just not as profitable as they would like. It's not like they're losing money and they had to do this to save the sinking ship. That's something completely different. These are highly profitable companies that missed a projection, and so they laid people off so they could meet that projection. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. And we know it because we feel it at work. We see this decline of trust. We are not loyal to our companies anymore. Why would we be? They're not loyal to us. And leaders set the tone. So when companies are loyal to us, we will give loyalty back to them. When they're not loyal to us, why would we be loyal to them? I'm tired of CEOs telling me that millennials these days don't stick around very long. Well, why would they if you don't offer them any kind of loyalty back? And it's not for the people to prove to you that they're loyal, it's the other way around.
Leadership is a responsibility to people around us. It's not a rank. You've heard me say this before. I know many people who sit at the highest levels of organizations who are not leaders.
Right.
They have authority, and we do as they tell us because they have authority over us, but we would not follow them.
Right.
And I know many people, as do you, who sit at lower levels of organizations who have no formal authority, in that they've made a choice to look after the person to the left of them and look after the person to the right of them, and we would trust them and follow them anywhere. In other words, leadership can come from anywhere within an organization. Yes, we have the right to demand to have better leaders and better leadership in our companies. But when we don't, quitting is not the only option, nor is simply complaining, but undertaking the task of becoming the leader we wish we had.
Wow.
Anyone at any level can become a student of leadership, and anyone at any level can choose to take to look after this person and that person and work tirelessly to see that they rise, they become better versions of themselves, and that they show up to work inspired and go home feeling fulfilled and feel safe when they're at work because of us.
I get asked very often, what are the most important characteristics of leadership? Vision, charisma, I know plenty of incredible leaders that aren't big Steve Jobs visionaries, they're just not. And I know some fantastic leaders who do not have charisma. They're quiet and super introverted, and they're just not that exciting to talk to, spend time with. When I say charisma, I mean the traditional definition of it, which is more about energy. I believe charisma is undying belief in something, and that they have in spades. Yeah. But I think courage is the one thing that all great leaders have to have, because we are surrounded by overwhelming forces every day of our lives pushing us to play the finite game. If you're a public company, the markets, all they want for their own selfish gain is for you to make short-term decisions. The pressures are overwhelming. If you're a numbers-driven person, the pressures are overwhelming. If you're in survival mode, the pressures are overwhelming. If you have a spouse who spends more money than you can make, the pressures are overwhelming. All the pressures around us, even the way we treat competition versus rivalry, like we feel like we have to win all the time. The pressures every day on us are absolutely overwhelming for us to be finite and to prioritize the short term over the long term, to prioritize the urgent over the important. And it takes unbelievable courage to put the important before the urgent. It takes unbelievable courage to resist all the pressures coming from selfish outside parties. It takes unbelievable pressure to do the right thing.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you're different. you are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome. For 10 more amazing rules from Robin Sharma, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I believe you're happiest not when you're watching TV. You're not happiest when you're playing with your apps. You're not happiest when you're looking for likes. You're not happiest when you're fooling around.